Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be checking out Titans Pacific Rim 40k by Pancreas No Works here on YouTube. Yes guys, this was recommended to me over on the Discord by Ratarat. Yes, thank you very much for that recommendation. You said I like Titans. That I do. That I do. I love myself mechs. I love myself Titans. Man, I just find the concept of them super fucking cool. Obviously Warhammer 40k has some amazing some mechs, Titan designs, you know what I'm saying? I fucking vibe with them very, very hard. I think this video specifically is to, I think it breaks down kind of, yeah, it looks like it breaks down each faction Titan a little bit more, and I think that's very cool, right? Because obviously we've only really seen Imperium Titans, we've seen Orc Titans. I think briefly in the Dawn of War trailers we obviously saw Tau Titans, I believe they were. I could be wrong though, maybe they were Eldar, I'm not too certain, but we did get to see briefly some other Xenos race Titans, but not really in depth or anything like that, you know? So I think it'd be super interesting to check this out. Big shout out to Ratarat, obviously, for that recommendation. Sick recommendation. I love, you know, from my previous videos, you know, I love that type of shit. That's the type of shit I'm into, you know what I mean? I love me a good mech, you know, but yeah, guys, I obviously haven't checked out any Pancreas No Work on the channel yet. A lot of you guys have been recommending him to me, though. They said you guys say he's a really good lore tuber, and he does a really good job on his videos. So obviously, I'm more than excited to check him out now. Yeah, big shout out to our members, the Hastati and the Triarii out there. Paralyzed Tortoise, big shout out to you, sir. I appreciate you as always. And yeah, leave a like, subscribe for more content, and leave your recommendations down in the comments below. Come join our Discord, obviously, be a part of the discussions. You know, come leave your recommendations to me or come chat with our other members. It's awesome to see you guys there, and it's awesome to be able to talk to you guys there. It's really cool to see you guys all in the Discord. So come join it, you know. But yeah, guys, without any further delay, let's get right into this video here, because I'm excited to learn some more about some Titans.
Titans. They're big.
Already
they're
a sick
scary,
illustration.
They pack a powerful punch.
As always, I will be writing
to
stuff
tell
down.
Naked people in a World War II drama that started as The Walking Dead. God, I wish
True.
Attack on Titan didn't take the direction it did. Not bad, just not my thing. But in 40k, Titans are just as varied as they are in anime land. Just about every race has their own rough equivalent, even if certainly some need more prominence on the tabletop. Hello, Necrons. Are you still stuck with the big scarab? The design is pretty cool, it just needs to be bigger. It's a bit bigger than a knight, but we gotta double that at the very least.
Oh,
Because
really?
I'm a simple man, I like
That's a lot
talking about
smaller.
giant stompy robots. The Bayformers movies and Pacific Rim are the best things I've ever seen.
Yeah, I was about to say, dude, Pacific Rim, fucking, I love the first one, obviously. The other ones, I think there's 2 or 3. Dog shit. I don't recommend them personally. Weren't my thing. I definitely went in a different direction. Didn't think it was the best, but the first one, man, the way they did Pacific Rim 1, the original, with the movement of the robots, the designs of the robots, super fucking sick, super fucking innovative, and they lost that feeling to their mechs in the later movies, and it was just like they don't, you know, shit seemed slower in a sense, like, or faster, sped up. They didn't like have like a robotic feel to them, you know? The thing I like about like the Titans, at least from the Imperium in 40k, yeah, they're massive, right? They feel massive. They're slow, they're lumbering. They can obviously move with speed too, obviously at very increased power draw, but you know, they act like a mech should, you know what I mean? An orc mech or an orc Titan acts like you would expect an orc Titan to act like, you know what I mean? It looks like it rolls around like it, you know? I think that's super cool. The Tau obviously have slick fucking like, you know, Gundam style kind of like Titans from my knowledge, you know? That's interesting. They each have like their own uniqueness in a way, so it makes sense like how they would move and perform in different ways too, you know? I think Pacific Rim 1 is a sick movie. Everyone should go watch it at least once if you haven't seen it, because I think it's a fantastic movie if you're into that type of thing, you know?
Stompy robots. The Bayformers movies and Pacific Rim are the best things I've ever seen, and I can't get enough of watching big things hit each other.
Yeah.
And lo hath 40k provided. So in brutal honesty, that's what we're talking about. The Titans of 40k. Some of them are slow and lumbering, some of them do backflips across the battlefield.
Exactly.
And while one example isn't quite a Titan, it certainly has both the physical weight and price tag of one. But no matter which faction they belong to, all of them have enough warfare capability to moderately embarrass Lockheed Martin. Only moderately, though. So sit
Fair
down
enough.
and get comfortable. Maybe get some tea ready in either your teapot or your coffee dispenser you took the pot out of, and listen as I pretend that talking to people on the internet about big stompy mechs blowing up toy army soldiers is a respectable job. But you know, I bet a whole lot of math and science goes into the creation of a Titan. And do you know just where you can find yourself some good proper learning for math and science? Brilliant, the sponsor of this video.
Ooh.
Brilliant is where you go to learn data science, computer science, math, and plenty more.
Obviously, I'm going to leave this in. If you guys want to skip ahead, you can, but
memorization.
Going to give the creator his due here, obviously. Put a lot of work into this video.
Help you get those problem-solving skills in tip-top shape for just such an occasion. This is coming from someone who would remember a math problem and only ever be able to solve that single math problem. Turns out memorizing that one equation doesn't help with the 500 after it. And if that sounds like you too, Brilliant is here to help. What's more, though, Brilliant is completely at your own pace. You can learn on your phone or your computer, so if you've got the time, you have free reign to work on whatever you please. Speaking of time, though, there's no pressure there either. If you've got a long train commute, whip out Brilliant on your phone and do
That's
some
so
courses
convenient.
there. If you've only got a couple of minutes at home, work on part of a course on your computer. Everything in between and beyond is perfectly acceptable with Brilliant, because it's here to help you learn what you want when you want it. A good beginner course to try for you could be any of the ones on data. Using data is always handy, whether it be for your career or just optimizing your chores, so working on enhancing those skills is a great way to start your Brilliant journey. And if you thought I was done, you must be insane, because I've got a deal for you.
Ooh, a deal?
Pinned comment, you get not only 30 days of Brilliant free, but 20% off your annual premium subscription.
Obviously, of course, if you guys plan on using Brilliant, go use code Pancreas Networks for your 30-day free trial. Obviously, you know, I obviously don't have a code, so you can't use mine, but go use his code. Go check that out if you plan on using Brilliant service.
That's https://brilliant.org/pancreasnoworks/ for a 30-day free trial and 20% off the annual premium subscription. You can never have too much knowledge, so sign up with Brilliant today and start working out those brain muscles. Now then, the rumbling. I hope you're all happy with this, because with this video I'm pretty sure I've officially qualified for the YouTuber hell of remaking old content. That video was one thrown together in about an hour and a half, and overall kind of garbage. So here's a video about Titans that is longer than 4.5 minutes, and
that's fair.
Doesn't suck quite as hard. Titans across all races have the same rough idea behind them. Sometimes overkill is all that will suffice. To explain to you what exactly I mean, let's briefly take a look at the Tau. The Tau, upon first hearing about the Imperium's Titans, assumed it was just propaganda. And to be
I do like
fair to them,
the uniform of the Tau.
That's
what I will say.
The Imperium of mankind would invest what must amount to billions, if not trillions, worth of resources to a single engine of war that isn't a spacecraft is insane. Imagine just how many soldiers you could arm for the price of a single Warhound Titan, let alone a warlord. You've heard the story, though. Then those churches the Guayla set up on the horizon one day started walking towards them, and they realized that no, they are not propaganda. Of course, they didn't change their mind on Titans immediately, still viewing it as a vastly inefficient use of resources, and again, they aren't completely wrong to think that. They are on some level an inefficient use of material. But at least to me, there's two reasons why everyone else has one, and the Tau eventually came around and built some equivalents. Reason one is that same propaganda and morale value
that looks awesome.
The Tau assumed was all there was to it. The idea of a Titan coming to assist a war effort bolsters the morale of the troops, especially in the Imperium, where they're seen as the wrath of the Emperor and or the Omnissiah made manifest in a war machine. When
Literally.
you're actually on the battlefield, you have a weapon that, depending on the author and source, is either a decent fraction of the size of the Statue of Liberty or significantly taller than it. Armed.
So, like, again, obviously, yeah, great point. When a Titan shows up on the battlefield, man, especially for Imperium forces, holy fuck, if you're the average guard and you see one of those, we're graced by the fucking Emperor. The Emperor is with us here because we have one of these fucking god machines, quite literally, right? Like, that's what they are. They're machines of God. Is kind of how they view them in a sense, right? Either it's a product of the Messiah himself, or it is literally the Emperor's god machines of war, right? Like, literally. I think that's so fucking sick. And obviously, how could you not think that? Like, look at the size of these motherfuckers, right? They're walking battleships, essentially, even larger, right? As he just mentioned. So it's like, you know, how could you not be inspired? How could your morale not be boosted? And obviously, the Tau have a very great point. Supply material wise, maintenance wise, yes, so much fucking increased maintenance on a Titan. Way more material wasted. You could arm so many individuals for the same cost, especially if your small arms are decent. But obviously the problem is a Titan supported by other elements is a fucking terror on the battlefield, right? If you can't get close enough to kill it, and obviously the Tau rely a lot on their range, but if their weapons are not actually big enough to take on a Titan without sustained fire on it, they're going to get eaten up by the supporting ground forces in an ideal scenario for the Imperium, right? So it's like, you know, they eventually they have to come around to the idea of them, I believe, you know, and I'm sure that's why they did, you know.
Is either a decent fraction of the size of the Statue of Liberty or significantly taller than it. Armed, of course, with starship-grade weapons and armor.
Yeah.
You don't even need to be near it once it's deployed. Your morale isn't breaking when you know one of those is fighting on your side. 2 is that in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, sometimes an efficient weapon isn't what you need. This might end up sounding a bit like circular logic, but let's just take a look at what the Imperium faces on a regular basis. You've got things like Tyranids and their towering monstrosities, chaos demons that are a dozen times as tall as a man with weapons from beyond our understanding, and of course the orcs building towering piles of moving garbage that can evacuate entire postcodes by accident. Failing anything like that, just consider how many enemies the Imperium might face at a time. Tyranids and orcs again can completely cover the landscape of a battlefield, and even before the Tau started building direct counters to Titans, they could still dig in so deep even Space Marines couldn't get them out. Sometimes arming however many thousands of troops worth of resources a Titan costs isn't the solution. It absolutely is the most efficient use of resources, but all that efficiency will achieve is that the Tyranids devour twice as many well-equipped guardsmen as they would have otherwise. And speaking of efficiency,
that's fair.
while this is mostly an Imperial problem, the Administratum probably can't even do that sort of thing. Sending the resources to one Forge World to build a Titan is a lot easier than figuring out how to spread those same resources across 50 different guard regiments.
That's also true.
They no longer exist, but no one can be sure of that.
That is true. In the grand scale, that's actually a completely valid point logistically on the grand scale of the Imperium. I'm glad he actually mentioned that, because that gets you thinking, right? Like, yeah, just to send a mass amount of material to one world, use it as you need it to build a fucking Titan. Okay, that's so much easier than, 50 hive worlds that may or may not exist, you know? And I think that's an amazing point to the last video we watched, the Tyranid First Contact. Obviously, it was a year before they even realized that the planet had been fucking overrun. You know what I mean? Especially on one of these frontier colonies, right? So, yeah, like Imperium bureaucracy is a fucking mess. They might not know it, so they might be sending resources straight to the fucking enemy at that point. You know what I mean? Especially if the planet doesn't exist, or if it's overrun, or maybe it's just occupied by an enemy force. You just sent a fucking logistics convoy into an enemy-held system suddenly, you know? So yeah, I could totally understand how on the few good for sure Forge worlds that you have, you would absolutely be enticed just to fucking send them there, because you know they're safe, you know it's not going to get wasted in a sense, you know? I can understand that logic.
Plus 50 different guard regiments, half of whom may no longer exist, but no one can be sure of that. No, sometimes the best solution is to build a giant mech that can punch God directly in the face.
Yeah, literally.
There's
yeah,
not many
that works.
better options for this than to put starship-grade weapons and armor on one and tell its
Might as
pilot
well.
and/or AI ghosts to go nuts. For the Imperium, Titans are all created, maintained, and deployed by the Collegia Titanica, the Mechanicus division that predictably oversees Titans. Clues in the name. While the history of the Collegia Titanica is worth a video on its own, most likely when I'm even more out of ideas than I already am right now, the main thing you need to know about it, aside from the fact that it oversees Titans, are the Principes. Singular Princeps.
We know a little bit about them.
A Princeps is in essence the pilot of a Titan, although the word pilot doesn't do it nearly enough justice. Unlike most positions in the Imperium, Princeps are sought out amongst individuals who are extremely individualistic and full of willpower. Maybe not to the point that they'll ignore orders on a whim, but they want people with some defiance in their hearts. This is because Principes are plugged directly into the Titan they interface with. When they're in, they aren't just piloting the Titan, they are the Titan. The reason for all this willpower and determination, aside from the fact you don't want some rando going insane when they suddenly realize they're a god of destruction.
I don't know what that's from, but that looks awesome.
They need to essentially wrestle the Titan's machine spirit into submission. They need to beat down the maybe AI, maybe spirit, maybe both of a Titan until it recognizes them as their master, at least in most regards. And unlike plenty of other Imperial equivalent where the machine spirit might not actually exist, you can be damn sure sure this has one powerful one inside of it.
Yeah.
It is a feisty bastard. Someone not of sufficient willpower might have their consciousness devoured by the machine. Of course, on that note, this fate is more or less an inevitability for the Titan Principes. The machine spirit of a god engine is too powerful to resist forever, and sooner or later they will merge with it. Usually literally, as after a long enough time, the Titan and Princeps begin to imprint their personalities onto each other, which can lead to some real interesting Gestalt soul stuff if you consider some Titans have been in service since the Horus Heresy and have undoubtedly had numerous Principes piloting them. Even with this connection, Titans still require other servants underneath the Princeps to function. There's various ranks that all go into managing one system or other while the Princeps controls different ones, because especially early on before they've melded a bit, controlling an entire Titan at once requires some serious mental fortitude.
Right, and we learned a little bit about the Titan operation in the Luton video, I believe. So it's good to get a nice little refresher on this, and obviously get a new take on it too. And obviously, maybe if he goes into a little bit more detail about the crew on it, I think that'd be very interesting too. I think Luton did as well. But man, it's always good to have a good refresher on these things. Especially given the amount of lore that there is, you know, I'm sure it might vary a little bit, you know, for sure.
Now, naturally, what you get out of this is the power of the ultimate destructive war machine controlled by a person who is entirely one with it. They feel not only the air and combat around the Titan, but its pain when struck with a weapon. They feel its hunger to get into battle, its desire to wreak havoc. Though their humanity slips away over time, they're gods of war until this finally happens. And depending on how you read into the soul melding stuff, they never truly fade. You could argue they simply become one with it in a way no other being can hope to match, short of other Principes. Actually, most Principes are relatively unaugmented, at least in terms of replacing their limbs with charging cables and all that jazz. Turns out, becoming one with the walking embodiment of the Omnissiah is close enough to achieving whatever enlightenment the Mechanicus seeks that you don't really need all that fancy extra limb stuff. And interestingly enough, Titans aren't quite lost technology yet. There's undoubtedly plenty of Forge worlds that used to be able to make Titans that no longer can. This is still the Imperium talking about. But there's plenty on the flip side that still can make new ones. That doesn't mean that Titans are just thrown into the fray willy-nilly, even ignoring the fact that the Imperium's constant degradation means less and less can be made each year.
So I thought that's interesting, because I didn't think they actually had STCs to create new Titans, at least certain types, I believe. What is it, the Ravager class? I could be wrong on that. But there was one class I know that there was only a few of them, and they stopped kind of making them. And one of the theories behind that was that the STC was destroyed or something of that sort. I believe I could be wrong. It was a little bit ago now, but I'm pretty sure I recall that. That being said, I didn't know that they could actually. Now, obviously, I don't know what type of Titans he's referring to. He could just be talking about smaller warhounds or the like, versus like, you know, huge fucking, what are they called? I forget the class name of them, but I'm sure he's going to remind me here, of course.
Flip side that still can make.
But the huge Titans, I'm sure they maybe can't produce those all the time.
Even ignoring the fact that the Imperium's constant degradation means less and less can be made each year, these are still incredibly expensive investments. That's why in Space Marine 1, Forge World Graia had strategic value absolute. While there's that secret nonsense with the artifact that was going on, it's also one of the places where the god machines of the Imperium can still be churned out. Losing that is not an option. If Graia was just an agri world, it would have been blown to Kingdom Come and forgotten about. Now, in the name of transparency, some of what I'll be talking about are not technically Titans. This is for a couple of reasons, but the chief among them being a lot of factions don't really have any proper Titan equivalents. They may have had in the past, but in some ways they don't nowadays. By this I mean they don't have the classic Forge World mortgage payment brick of resin on the tabletop currently available to them. They may, however, have rough equivalents of the lore, or things that, while not explicitly Titans, are certainly Titanic in scale. I'm also only really going to talk about if it has a model, and I'm only going to talk about its rules if they're properly playable in 40k. Sorry, Adeptus Titanicus players, but that game can go burn in hell. Going purely off the GW web store, I believe 3.5 factions have a proper Titan, with the others having either almost Titans on tabletop, I'll include for completion's sake, or ones that exist in the lore. The Imperium has a whole bunch, the Elder have 2, which isn't completely unreasonable. I'm not going to complain too much about that, it's still a Titan. And the Tyranids meanwhile have 1, which is a tremendous shame. And if you're wondering who the half faction is, don't you worry. We'll get to that abomination soon enough.
I find it very, sorry to pause, but I find it very interesting that the Tyranids only have 1 Titan. That's very, surprising to me, I guess, you know, just given how the Tyranids are. Obviously, they harvest like biomass to create more Tyranids, you know, in a sense. So you'd think that you would see quite a bit of variation, perhaps, amongst Tyranid Titans, you know. That is a damn shame. Games Workshop, what the fuck you doing? You know, you got to get on that, you know, because I feel like if anyone's going to create Titans, huge monstrosities, it would be the Tyranids, right? Again, I'm mashing a bio, like you see their ships and whatnot. It's literally like flesh ships, you know what I'm saying? Like it's fucked, but like, so why wouldn't they do that variation on the ground? That doesn't make sense. It would just be a mashup of all types of stuff. Obviously, they're not really doing it with any sort of obviously it is a hive mind, so they are doing it with a greater intelligence in mind, but you think that there would definitely be variation depending on circumstance there. It's surprising that there isn't.
You're wondering who the half faction is? Don't you worry, we'll get to that abomination soon enough. Starting with the Imperium, or rather continuing, now that I think about it, Titans are all part of a Titan Legion. Titan Legions are based off of a particular Forge world, acting as their home base. From there, the organization goes into manipoles, groups of 3 to 5 Titans led by the Princeps Senioris. If there's a Warlord Titan in the group, then that's probably where the Princeps Senioris is. But not always, and for Scouting Titan manipoles, a very funny phrase, it'll probably be the most experienced one in the group. The same can be said of a Titan Legion as a whole, and given that many Titan Legions are undoubtedly at least somewhat under strength from combat losses, theoretically any sort of Titan can be the leader of the Legion as a whole. Also worth noting is that some Imperial Knight houses act as direct vassals of Titan Legions. Not many, as knights usually serve the Imperium in general or the Mechanicus specifically, but sometimes they will be vassals directly to a Titan Legion. Even if not, those serving the Mechanicus can expect to work alongside Titans more often than the rest of their knightly brethren. Knights in this case act as skirmishers for the Titans and as scouts, which is still a funny idea, albeit a lot more understandable than someone looking at a Warhound and thinking it's perfect for reconnaissance. While
yeah, that's fair.
Knights are usually the biggest and baddest thing you'll see on the battlefield. Once you get to the scale of Titans, they're a lot less impressive. Still though, groups of knights can most certainly harass their larger counterparts if push comes to shove, and at the very least I'm sure a dozen or so Imperial Knights can threaten a Warhound. But in the grand scheme of things, they're still small fry, so let's finally talk about the big mechs. Just a reminder again, only really going to talk about the ones that have actual rules and models, with the
So yeah, obviously Titans are not, or Titans, Knights are not Titans. We obviously made that distinction very clear in our previous videos, but obviously it's hard not to see how you can't consider them a mech on a small scale, right? Like obviously, like just look at them, look at how they're designed, you know. Obviously, yeah, again, not to the scale of Warhammer Titans at all, but that is a mech still in a sense, you know what I'm saying? It's very cool to see, even on the smaller scale. Honestly, man, a knight would be fucking cool to get and paint. I'm just saying, a knight would be like a good starter, you know, not super expensive either, but kind of like a midway point, you know. Be interesting.
But in the grand scheme of things, they're still small fry, so let's finally talk about the big mechs. Just a reminder again, only really going to talk about the ones that have actual rules and models, with the exception for Xenos factions because a lot of them only have stuff from the lore. For example, something called the Mirage class Titan exists. It has no artwork and is said to be comparable to a warlord. That's it. Being frank with you, I don't care. If I can't spend several car payments worth of cash on it, it doesn't interest me. The first Titan the Imperium has to overkill things with is the Warhound Scout Titan. Even at being the smallest, they're still over 50 feet tall, so our starting point is already Eren Yeager and then a bit more on top. Pre-rumbling Eren Yeager, he got a bit bigger towards the end there. A Warhound Scout Titan has 2 main roles when it comes to the field of battle. The first is in the name. When the Titan Legions need some reconnaissance done, they send the Warhounds to go check a place out. And while I did make fun of them for it, I do kinda get it. Once the Titans are being deployed, you can
they are the most expendable Titan, in a sense.
So sending in the Warhounds is a good way to make sure your reconnaissance teams can actually report back to you before they get obliterated. The other combat role is to group up in wolf packs to gang up on their enemies and take them down as a team. Against normal-sized enemies, or even knights, a single Warhound is more than enough to take them on. As a group, just say goodbye. And against larger Titans, this gives them an excellent chance of punching above their weight class, because even though they're smaller, 2 Titans is still 2 Titans. That'll mess up most singular enemies that'll face up against them. Aside from that, just a quick reminder that this is still a Titan. By all means, they are intended for a scouting role, as well as harassing enemy super units.
But still a Titan, that's the thing. You have to think of the scale of 40k. If you saw this quote-unquote scouting Titan, as just like an average lower force, you'd still shit your pants and be outmatched in every single way. A Warhound Titan to anything else, like any other universe, would be fucking a challenge in and itself, right? And obviously, it's the smallest Titan in 40k for the Imperium, at least I should say. So that's just a super interesting thing, you know. Like, you might not think of them as big and bad in this universe, but they're still huge and bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, they'll fuck anything up still, given the chance, and in numbers especially. They're a force to be reckoned with, obviously. Against the biggest of enemies, yeah, they will meet their match there, but you still can't just like push them off as like something not to be trifled with, you know?
A Titan. By all means, they are intended for a scouting role, as well as harassing enemy super units so that the main body of the Titan Legion can open up on them unimpeded. But if it's just them in a normal battle, inasmuch as any battle with Titans is normal, they will perform just fine advancing up the battlefield as the center of an army. The traitor Legio Audax even goes as far as to only have Warhounds in its ranks. They're a bit more armored than normal Warhounds, but they prove that the Warhound is perfectly capable on its own. There is unfortunately no way to fire the Ursus Claw in 40k gameplay though, so you cannot fire the massive Titan scale harpoon at people who bother you, which is a tragedy. And the rules of course reflect their position pretty well. With a movement of 14 inches, it is the fastest of the Imperium's Titans, even having a special rule that lets it advance with a flat extra 8 inches of movement rather than rolling for it. Well, sure, this isn't the fastest thing in the entire game. For something as destructive as this, it might as well be light speed. It's also the only Titan in the Imperium's roster that has weapon ranges that aren't silly.
So that's interesting to me, because obviously I haven't actually seen like game rules or anything like that, you know what I'm saying? So it's interesting to see like how movement is done in like inches, for example, all these dice rolls and whatnot. I don't really know what any of them mean, obviously, you know, like invulnerability saves and stuff like that, but you know, I don't know a whole lot about the tabletop outside of that. So, but it is interesting to see, kind of give you an idea a little bit.
It's also the only Titan in the Imperium's roster that has weapon ranges that aren't silly. Silly meaning, why did they bother giving it a range at all instead of just making it infinite? Of course, I never played Apocalypse, so that might be the reason. Those are some big game boards those players got. For base stats, before we even look at weapons, this thing is already the monster you'd expect. Toughness 13, leadership 6 if that matters to you, a 2-up save and 5-up invuln, and 16 objective control. To top it off, a nice crisp 40 wounds. At 1100 points, this is the only Titan you will be seeing at reasonably point-costed games, and honestly at that price, if you've enough disposable income to buy one of these things, you might as well deploy it, or 3D print it, if we're being honest with ourselves. The weapons, meanwhile, give you everything you could possibly need to take on your opponent's arm.
Obviously, don't endorse it or anything, but you know, me and some of the community members in Discord, we were discussing the merits of 3D printing versus just buying, and you guys let me know what you think. I think listen, if it's something you're gonna do, I think it's definitely worthwhile to invest, and then because once you have it, man, you're buying fucking like filament by like the kilogram at a minimum, and it's only like $20. You can make a lot of shit with that. You know what I'm saying? It's just the case of where do you get like the PDF to print, right? Like the actual model itself, I guess, to print it. But apparently it's pretty easy to get. So I'm not saying, I'm not endorsing nothing, right? I'm not endorsing nothing like that. I'm just saying, you know.
Being honest with ourselves. The weapons, meanwhile, give you everything you could possibly need to take on your opponent's army. If you're facing a horde army, 20 shots of a Mega Bolter at strength 6 and sustained hits is going to tear apart pretty much every infantry unit in the game. Did you know Custodes are toughness 6? This thing's weakest weapon will still wound them on a 4, and with 2 damage a pop, kill most things you'd want to be shooting at in 1 hit. Maybe 2. Alternatively, the Inferno gun is a bit random in how many attacks you actually get, but automatically hitting and being strength 7 can be the boost you need if you are specifically facing someone like the Custodes or a more elite army in general. As a certified Wraithguard lover, this thing would make me cry. Aside from those, you've got your plasma gun, which you might as well overcharge since the Titan can absolutely tank it, and a turbo laser. You see, this thing has a hyphen in its name so that Disney can't sue them. It also does 2d6 damage a shot and has a strength of 20. Goodbye, anything you hit with it. All of these aside from the Inferno gun hit on 3s. Not the most accurate of weapons, but given how much fire they're going to be putting out, you'll be hitting more often than not. For its melee attack, it just steps on the enemy. Not phenomenal, but hey, anything trying to melee it will take 8 strength 10 hits, so that's nice. For some quick general stuff before we move on, the Warhound as well as all further Titans are both super heavy walkers and have the Striding Colossus special rule. Super heavy walker means that if a model
each time you target this model with a stratagem, you must spend twice that stratagem's stated CP to do so. Damn.
Colossus means that any stratagems you use on them cost double the amount of command points, so you'd best make sure you really want to use it on the Titan because it's going to cost you.
Oh, you can just add another 8 inches of move. Wow.
100 points means it's the only thing you can reasonably expect to see or use in a normal match, but it does affect all of the Imperium's Titans. The cousin of the Warhound is the Direwolf Heavy Scout Titan. The Direwolf is only available in Adeptus Titanicus, but it does at least have a model, so I'll acknowledge it. This is the same basic idea as a Warhound, but just beefed up a bit. If you need even more aggressive scouting missions, you take the Direwolf with you. It's also potentially, and that potentially is doing a whole lot of lifting towards me not getting sued, a complete ripoff of the Direwolf Clanner mech from Battletech. No, seriously, look at the Warhammer one, look at the Battletech one. I wonder where they got the idea
They look
from.
awful similar, but the head is different.
Its arms. I do not like this thing, for it is not only unoriginal, but ripping off the Clanner scum. Next up is the Reaver.
Listen, I'm just gonna say, obviously everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I still think it's a fucking cool Titan. You know what I mean? I would still rather have one than none. That's all I'm saying. You know, I'd still fucking paint that shit. You know what I'm saying? I'd get one of them.
Like this thing.
They weren't so expensive, of course.
Unoriginal, but ripping off the Clanner scum. Next up is the Reaver Battle Titan. Now this is where we get to the main line of the Titanic.
Right.
When the God Machines all line up to throw continent-destroying weapons at each other, these are the go-to option. Kinda. Interestingly, it's actually older than its larger cousin, the Warlord Titan, which is slowly but surely phasing it out. Nevertheless, given the naturally higher cost of a Warlord and the fact that the Reaver is still more than capable of wrecking shop, this bad boy isn't going anywhere anytime soon. In a lot of ways, it's sort of the default Titan. You know, not sure if you need Warlord levels of firepower, but also not sure a Warhound can take the heat? Bring a Reaver. Despite the status as the generic Titan, it does have a unique feature in that its plasma reactor is located closer to the back of the thing's body. The plus side is that this means the Reaver can in some ways charge through fire that might threaten even a Warlord Titan. Downside is that if you can get behind it, or even just on its sides, you can take it out with comparatively minimal effort. For this reason, its speciality can be said to be open field engagements. Titans already have difficulty fitting in streets. I mean, they're Titans, but the Reaver's rear-placed reactor means that it can charge headfirst into fire with far less risk than other variations.
Not even charge headfirst, I must say, but like even on a street combat, again, if as long as it's at distance holding a street, nothing can get behind it, right? Ideally, that's a force to be reckoned with. Just hold your position, just fire on them, right? Like fuck, like you'd be pretty unstoppable, I guess, in battlefields or battle spaces on the tabletop where I'm sure there might be debris. You can't obviously get around it type of thing. Because I've seen some tabletop designs that looks very cool, very interesting. Obviously, you can get debris and shit in the way, block line of sight, whatnot, I'm sure. Very interesting, very in-depth. I like the strategy behind it a lot. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, I love strategy games in general. So, you know, that's... You know, I don't know how to play the tabletop, but it would be very interesting to learn, you know?
Rear-placed reactor means that it can charge headfirst into fire with far less risk than other variations. As a consequence, an urban mech would be the bane of this thing's existence. In lore, they'll generally be equipped with this in mind, being equipped with relatively close-ranged weaponry. In deployments of Titan Legions as a whole, though, there will always be at least a few with longer-ranged weapons equipped. For its rules, it reflects its position in the lore fairly well. While it has the same 12 inches of movement as all the rest of the Imperial Titans from here on out have, it can still shoot and charge.
Damn, 200 inches
it is still somewhat more
of range
than a larger Titan. At 2,200 points, we're now 200 over the standard 2K game, so the average 40K player probably won't be seeing this fella, but with 60 wounds and the 2-up save with a 5-up invuln, it's certainly worth the cost. With an increase to 14 toughness from the Warhound's 13, it's also just that little bit harder to wound as well. Now for its weaponry, let me ask you a question. Have you ever wanted to wound Mortarion on a 2? Because you very much can. At D3 plus 1 shots and 120 inches of range, the Reaver Volcano Cannon is going to send pretty much anything it fires at straight to hell. Minus 5 AP. Did you ever think you'd see such a wonderful thing? It's even got blast and heavy, and with that kind of range, this thing probably doesn't need to move much once it's into position.
Yeah.
And 14 damage, of course. Beyond that, it has other weapons for every possible
So
want.
that Reaver Volcano Cannon, 120 inches of range, wound on a 3. Fucking insane. I'm guessing, right? Like, I'm assuming that's absolutely nuts, and you can't just, like, especially the unit he's talking about, right? Like, fuck, man. Like, these things, and I'm assuming, again, most people don't see these, as he says, right? Because you're over, like, normal match points and whatnot. So I'm thinking you'd have to probably go to, like, specialized kind of like events for this types of games, or just to, like, do it amongst yourselves if, like, you have enough friends that kind of have it. But damn, you know?
Gatling blasters for hordes, the apocalypse launcher for people who think a chest-high wall will save them from this monstrosity, and a melta-cannon, which I'm sorry to say only does strength 13 hits, so you'll only be wounding Mortarion on 3s. It even has a proper melee weapon, a strength 20 power fist, as well as the ability to just step on things. If you're running a big enough game, throw the Reaver into a blob of chaff for the fun of it. Why yes, that guardsman did deserve a strength 12 AP 2 6 damage hit. Fuck him. Moving up to the next one on the scale is the Warbringer Nemesis title.
Fuck that guy, and specifically that guardsman.
Reaver, but not quite full Warlord yet, with a bit of a specialization
Reaver
in
Titans.
long-range combat. They're not the most renowned Titan, as they're a relatively new one, all things considered, but apparently their machine spirits are real full of bloodlust, to the point that they'll start locking onto targets before anyone inside the thing even realizes there's an enemy present. At 2,600 points, we are now well beyond the average game of 40k, but for that, you do get an extra 20 wounds compared to the Reaver's stat block. Also, remember the Reaver's Strength 24 gun? You can mount 2 of them on this thing.
Holy
one on the
shit.
arm and one on the head. It also has a few weapons you get automatically integrated into it. By Titan standards, the Anvilus Defense Battery and Ardex Defensor Mauler are quite shit, but they're not taking up any main weapon slots and instead are a nice way to clear out small targets. The Nemesis Quake Cannon has 480 feet of range.
They do seem a little bit more shit than the others, for sure.
Fire or to hit someone
comparatively, that's for sure.
Table, you can swap it out with the Volcano Cannon for D3 shots compared to the Reaver's D3 plus 11.
Like, yeah, Nemesis Quake Cannon, 480 inches. Yeah, you're literally hitting somebody at the next table. Hey, we actually biffed a shot, and suddenly the DM just tells you, yeah, actually there's a fucking Reaver shot just fucking skyrocketing through the middle of your game. Watch out, duck for cover. Like, fuck, you know? I've heard some pretty interesting, especially in, like, Dungeons and Dragons and shit like that, and, like, other DM-based games, just, like, funny shit like that happening. Like, oh, yeah, we used, like, Charm. Yeah, fucking, guess what now? This Gorgon is fucking these people's problems on the next fucking, like, table, you know? Or Wish. That was a meme. That was a meme, actually, in the Discord. Somebody used Wish and fucking wished it was somebody else's problem, so the DM picked it up and moved it to another fucking table. It's like, what the fuck? That's so cheese, you know? Just shit like that. That's fucking hilarious to me.
Aside from that, it's got identical weaponry to the Reaver.
Obviously not serious at all, but it is just a funny idea, you know?
Friendly units that also fire at it get an extra AP bonus on a critical hit. This is, of course, assuming there's anything left of that unit after the Titan is done firing, but it is theoretically helpful. Technically skipping ahead is the Warmaster Heavy Battle Titan. It's actually bigger than the Warlord and can be armed with all sorts of deadly weaponry. It can have turbo lasers, mega bolters, melta cannons, plasma guns, and missile launchers for whatever flavor of hell you want to unleash. However, it's a Titanicus exclusive, so I'm just getting it out of the way for completion.
Oh, I see.
Onto the actual big boy Titans are known for. The Warlord Battle Titan. For the most part, the biggest and baddest thing in any battlefield, and the bane of people trying to get accurate measurements in this setting. The current most agreed upon number I could find is roughly 33 meters or 100 feet tall. In the olden days, when things were cool and GW just threw whatever number sounded the coolest out, it was 200 meters tall. That's over 650 feet and would probably register on the Richter scale every time it walked. While it is newer than the Reaver Titan, Warlords still date as far back as the Horus Heresy, even if an exact date hasn't been specified, so new is relative. They're the main battle titan of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and deployed to missions where there can be no chance of defeat. These things' mere presence bolsters the spirit of any Imperial present, being a reminder of the God Emperor's holy might, the Omniscias, and the Imperiums in general.
And it's not hard to see why, that's for sure.
The list of things you can strap onto a unit or model. But the thing is, every time I look at the Warlord's stats, my eyes begin to glaze over everything but the option for a weapon that deals 18 damage a shot at Strength 32 and AP 5. Strength 32. There
Strength
are a variety
32,
of different weapon
volcano
options you can
cannon.
put for different purposes, as you can see, but the thing is, I can only imagine a Warlord Titan being used in one scenario. And that scenario is your opponent also has a Warlord Titan. At 100 wounds and toughness 16 for their stats, the Bellicosa Volcano Cannon seems goddamn purpose-built to specifically take on other Warlord Titans.
Like,
For what
yeah.
other possible reason would a Strength 32 weapon exist? Because otherwise, a Reaver or Nemesis would more than suffice with weapons at Strength 24. But I suppose that if you're deploying a Warlord, which costs a nice 3,500 points as of time of writing, actually caring about things like cost-effectiveness is not a part of the
So that's a
equation.
whole
Putting
army
into
for
their
sure,
lore,
right?
You're playing to make a statement as much as you are to win.
Yeah.
Also, you're playing Apocalypse and have infinite money, so who cares about point costs?
True.
Its special little ability is that one unit you hit during your shooting phase has to take a battle
Wrath
shot
of the
test at end
Omnissiah.
of phase. Kinda disappointing, but the ability is called Wrath of the Omnissiah, which at least sounds cool
Battle
as hell.
shock
There's
test.
also the Warlord Psi Titan. How you make this is you take a blank and make him a Princeps. Then you get a bunch of Alpha grade Psychers, who for those of you unaware are the highest grade of Psychers possible before the Imperium scale can no longer accurately gauge their power, and strap them to one of these things to fuel its weapons and keep it safe. Unfortunately it's Titanicus only, but if you'd like to at least proxy its models for a 40k tabletop game, just grab a bunch of Psyker models from all sorts of factions and glue them to the sides of it. Go full Night Lords while you're at it, put some skin capes on it.
I think somebody told me actually about that in our Luton video that, yeah, there's psychic titans out there, like psyker titans. That's fucking wild to me, and I never like really knew more about them, but yeah, they take a blank and they make that the precepts of the titan. That's fucking nuts. I had no idea that's like obviously how they were made. I haven't really heard much about them specifically. That's fucking cool as shit though. Damn.
Glue them to the sides of it. Go full Night Lords while you're at it. Put some skin capes on it. It's already macabre enough, just go whole hog. Now this last one I'm bringing up doesn't have rules in 40k right now, but the thing is, I saw one in real life. At Warhammer Fest in 2023, there was this Titan March thing going on. Might not have been called that, don't quite remember, but it was an excuse for people who spent thousands on a single mini to show their big lad off. And someone, I don't know who, but someone brought an honest-to-God Emperor Battle Titan they created. Imperators are the ones that have the churches bolted on top and are more gunned than mech. They're great. That's the more well-known of the two main variations.
Right.
The other is the Warmonger, which specializes at blowing up fortifications from beyond the horizon. There's not much I have to say here, but I really just wanted to talk about the time I saw a mini that was only half a foot shorter than I am. Now, while technically we're now moving on to Chaos Titans, the thing is they're just normal Titans but evil. More evil, rather. Imperium's already
that makes
evil.
sense.
For example, there's the Chaos Warlord Titans. Corn-aligned ones are the Bane Lord, Nurgle the Plague Lord, Slanesh the Pain Lord, and Tzeentch the Warp Lord. Funnily enough, all these names were given to them by loyalists. The traitorous princeps just took the names and ran with it. Kind of like how Yankee Doodle Dandy
They're
was
like, sure, fuck it, call us that.
We thought it was so catchy we adopted it. They are frequently possessed by demons, which does give them some differences, but it's nothing with a substantial tabletop presence and nothing that you couldn't figure out on your own. Corn-aligned ones are gonna have the melee weapons on them. Nurgle-aligned ones will be really hard to kill. You get the gist of it. Let's move on to the aliens. First up, Orcs. Orc Titans have a couple main design philosophies around them. The first and most canon version is that they're big walking effigies of Gork and Mork. When enough boys gather and the mech boys hit a critical mass of inspiration/insanity, they build some of the contraptions we'll be talking about here. The less canon philosophy, by which I mean that I don't think it's been explicitly stated, but I dare you to tell me I'm wrong, is that it's also a dick measuring contest.
Yes, I think so, very much.
Truck or a Death Dread and immediately works to one-up it, or he sees a Yumi Titan and is consumed with the desire to have something as stompy and shooty as it is. There's a couple different things that can result in this depending on how ambitious a creation they can make, but they all have one thing in common. They're less walking cathedral and more walking garbage pile. Honorable mentions go to the Gorkanaut and Morkanaut. They're not quite Titans and are instead closer to Imperial Knights in size. They are still effigies of the Orc gods, quite big and killy, and had the Titanic keyword though, so they're worth a mention. The first of what I consider to be the true Orc Titans though is the Stampa. Now an argument could certainly be made that a Stampa isn't quite a Titan either. Gorkanauts and Morkanauts, for instance, I believe are technically small Stampas. The flip side, however, is that a Stampa as a GW model is a lot bigger than an Imperial Knight model and costs 800 points, only 300 less than a Warhound. Now, unlike other factions' Titans, which at least in theory have roughly standardized designs, at least in the lore, a Stampa and all the other Orc Titans will be filled with whatever random garbage the mech boys feel like strapping onto it. Well, unfortunately, you can't do this as a legitimate tabletop option. If you'd like to create a homebrew Stampa that is nothing but stolen bolt guns taped to the side of it, all hooked up with a single switch, it would be
awesome.
quite more friendly. The real thing doesn't have that level of customization, but it does have a pretty decent spread of crap bolted onto it. You've got some big shooters, which now that I'm actually talking about it, are pretty much what I was just going on about. You get 3 of them, and they're pretty mediocre, with a rapid fire 2 and a 36-inch range. Still, though, not a bad way to put
definitely a lot
5 shots onto chest.
Definitely a lot
Same
weaker
for the
from the
big
looks,
shootout,
and a lot less
same thing,
range.
but twin-linked. The Def Cannon is the premier ranged weapon.
Super rockets
Strength
fucking
13,
got good
whatever you aim
range.
it at
Wow.
will be feeling the pain. At least assuming you hit. With a BS of 5 up and 3d6 shots, this can be an absolute monster or completely disappointing. Same for the Super Rockets, which shares its AP -3 and even does d6 plus 2 damage compared to the Def Cannon's d6, but again, d6 shots and only hitting on 5s. The only weapons I'd
Yeah, so you're mostly missing with the ranged weapon from the orcs, and that makes sense. Obviously, the melee weapons, you have a lot better roll chance to hit, right? I think that's very interesting. That makes a lot of sense, obviously, you know. And we saw like in Hell's Reach too, the orc Titan roll up and physically melee finish off the Imperium Titan. I thought that was really, really cool. And it makes sense given like the models, right?
say are mostly reliable are the Scorcha and the Super Gatla. The Scorcha has d6 attacks, but it's a flamer, so it at least auto hits, and the Super Gatla has 20 attacks.
Flamer's auto
some
hit.
of those are going to be hitting. The real punch comes from its melee capabilities. 6 attacks, WS plus 3, strength 24, AP -5, and 10 damage. If you roll perfectly, you can one-shot a Reaver with this thing. You can also
Holy
take
shit.
the sweep profile to thoroughly ruin the day of anyone wearing Terminator armor or worse, and only moderately ruin the day of just about everyone else. Having skipped over its base stats until now because I don't know what I'm doing, this thing has a legit Titanic stat line. 10 movement, 14 toughness, a 2-up save with a 6-up invuln, 30 wounds, 6 leadership, and 12 OC. It can also move over things 4 inches tall or shorter like the rest, and you know, that's a pretty impressive amount. That's a lot of inches. And friendly orc units within 12 inches of it get to reroll battle shock tests. Just as a nice little final bonus, it can also carry 22 models of orc infantry.
Oh,
this
wow.
includes Gazgul, although he's a big boy, so he takes up 15 models worth of space.
That makes
Maybe
sense.
Let's just pile an entire unit of boys into it to vomit on your enemy instead. But
Yeah.
hey, it will keep him.
That's fucking great, because obviously with the bigger Imperium Titans, we obviously know that in the legs, they can actually transport guard regiments to spill out and fight at close range if the Titan itself is threatened by an infantry force or something of that sort. I think it makes a lot of sense that the orcs, they do the same. Everything is a fucking troop transport for the orcs. They're just trying to get more boys into the action, you know what I'm saying? Into killing range. So that makes a lot of sense. It's very sick that you can fit 22 orcs and just fucking spill out of that fucking thing once you get close enough. It's very cool.
Includes Gazgul, although he's a big boy.
It'd be very sad if it gets one-hitted by some other Titan, though, on the map. They're all dead instantly.
On your enemy instead. But hey, it will keep him safe from fire pretty reliably, so it's not a horrible idea. For all they have going for them, though, Stampas suffer a bit from that 6-up invuln not being a 5-up. At 800 points, I'd say fair enough, but Tau players are going to have to be waistbanding their erections if you rock up with a Stampa, because a railgun is going to table this thing pretty effectively. If it was a 5-up, it'd be great, but a 6-up is pretty unreliable.
Yeah.
Very few weapons in this game have 5 armor-piercing value anyways, so in most cases, this really isn't going to actually matter. The only time you're likely to get use out of that 6-up invuln is when your opponent themselves has a Titan. Still though, all things considered, it isn't horrible. Better to have an invuln save than none, which is a problem we'll be coming back to later. The
Right.
other Orky Titans are all variants of Gargants. The regular one,
Gargants,
a Mega
that's what they're
Gargant,
called.
and a Great Gargant. Gargants are what happens when one or several mech boys start getting direct inspiration from the green gods to build something big. The end result is a Gargant. A regular one is roughly equivalent to a Reaver, a Mega Gargant a Warlord, and if the boys have a Great Gargant on the field, that would be like if one of the Cadian Cassers had legs. Their
Damn.
construction is weird. For example, they don't have much in the way of big plasma reactors that a single shot could take out if someone gets lucky. On the other hand, orcs being orcs, these things are filled to the brim with random ammo caches and piles of diesel, so setting one of those off can start a chain reaction across the whole thing.
Yeah.
The equivalent of void shields on the Titans are actually tougher than an Imperial's, but they
Really?
can't recharge mid-battle. Their armor is actually weaker, but orc construction means the density of random crap you have to blow through is also much higher. Were they to get modern stats, this could be represented by having a worse save, such as keeping that 6-up invuln or even reducing the normal one to a 3-up, but having a higher toughness or more wounds to compensate. Also, dick cannon. They also have far more in the way of crew. Even the Mechanicus has automated stuff, if not proper AI. Orcs, meanwhile, have hordes of Gretchen and assistants.
Yeah, just running around. Yeah.
Relay instructions by yelling really loudly. This is another case of pros and cons. While a mech boy or several is needed to properly maintain a Gargant and run it at peak efficiency, any random orc boy could probably take over the basics of this thing well enough. Orc tech may be hard to understand, but by God is it user-friendly. Big red button, make thing go boom. That's it. The flip side is that if you take enough random pot shots at one, you can probably kill enough of the crew to disable it without having to do too much major structural damage.
That's fair.
And of course, the last one is the Temple Gargant. This was the thing the Beast had, and for this I want you to do a little mental exercise. Take the Imperial Palace. You know, the one the Emperor's in, the one that spans the entire Himalayas mountain range and also probably a good few thousand square miles extra. Now let it move. It probably wasn't enough, Daka, but by God, it was the closest the orcs have ever gotten. Now next up, we have the Necrons, and this is where things get really awkward and quiet because they don't have one. They absolutely have the capability to make one because, yeah, no shit.
Very weird to me. Again, very weird that the Necrons, technically, obviously, to my knowledge, one of the newer races in 40k, one of the newer races, but in lore have been around for some of the longest time, right, in lore. But you would think really that they would have something to match the Imperial Titans for sure. You would think that they would easily be able to replicate something of that size and that power. So it's very interesting that they don't. Maybe that has more to do with their gameplay on the tabletop. I don't really know. Maybe they compensate, but you would definitely expect something gigantic from the Necrons for sure.
Have one. They absolutely have the capability to make one.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, no shit. They can time travel. Big Mech is not a concept beyond them. Tesseract vaults might count, kind of, but it does feel a bit weird to say they're a Titan. The closest thing they have is probably the Seraptic Heavy construct, although it is far closer to a Knight than a Titan. Nevertheless, it's got a Strength 24 ranged weapon that can do up to 10 damage and a Strength 14 melee attack, so it can certainly threaten the Imperium's Titans, even if in a 1v1 it'll likely lose.
Right.
Only 540 points at time of writing, though, it ain't bad, and with a 3-up save and 5-up invuln, it's ironically a better option against Titans than the more expensive Stompa, because
Titanic
the
Walker
is 5-up instead of 6. If not better, then at least more survivable because of that invuln save. 24 wounds too, so again, while a lot closer to a Knight, still pretty good. For the Tyranids, at present they've only got one real Titan equivalent available on the tabletop, the Hierophant Bio-Titan. As with all Tyranid creatures, it's devised to most effectively fight and devour whatever the galaxy can throw at the hive mind. At 12 inches of movement, toughness 14, 30 wounds, a 2-up save, and a 5-up invuln, it's once again on the lower end of Titanic stats, but it's certainly capable of threatening weaker ones at least.
Right.
Its ranged weapons are better suited towards chaff and elite infantry, but its Titanic scything talons hit its strength 20, even if their damage output is a bit funky at d6 plus 1 each attack. In theory, it could take down a Warhound in a single turn, and bring a Reaver down to 4 wounds if you hit every attack at max damage.
Damn.
Most likely, though, it'll probably be a bit disappointing if that's what you want it for. Still, for a truly Titanic creature, this is the Tyranid's best option, and at 810 points, you can reasonably fit one within your army without completely building your strategy around it. Only mostly building your strategy around it.
That's right, because like 810 versus like obviously what the Imperium has at like 2,000 points, like yeah, you could definitely fit one of these just in a regular kind of army, to my understanding, right? Like just a regular user-friendly kind of beginner army in a sense, you know? Not beginner per se, obviously, depending on how much you want to paint and whatnot, but like you could make an army kind of including one of those fairly easily in a sense, you know? I think that's very cool.
Completely building your strategy around it. only mostly building your strategy around it. It could even hold 20 infantry models in it.
Damn, that's awesome.
Kangaroo pouch, but with the Tyranids, it could very well be shitting them out onto the field. The Harridan is also close to being Titanic, and having held one before, it certainly has the weight of a Titan, but its weapons and stats leave much to be desired. The highest hitting attack is Strength 14, doing a completely random d6 of damage, and its ranged attack is d6 plus 6 attack, so that's also a bit all over the place. And its save is pretty depressing to look at. Even with 30 wounds at only toughness 10 and a 3-up save, any dedicated anti-armor weapons can chew through it pretty quickly. It can hold 20 gargoyles and a winged Tyranid Prime though, and at 610 points, the best use for this is probably as a transport to get a swarm where it needs to be that can also double as a decent source of damage itself. We'll be getting to the Eldar soon enough, but I want to talk about that faction with half a Titan first.
Eldar Titans look sick.
This thing, to be honest, isn't a Titan at all. It's not even a land-based vehicle, it's an aircraft. But look me in the eyes and tell me that the Tau Manta doesn't at least deserve an honorable mention in a video about Titans. Before we even get to lore or tabletop, let's just look at the thing itself. It costs 2010 American burger bucks. It's over 2 feet long and 2.5 feet wide. This is not a model, this is a brick. If you hit someone with this, you're giving them a concussion, so as a Titanic scale model, I'm counting it. If you don't, I think you're insane. But what about the stats of the thing? Well, tell me, how does 60 wounds, a 2-up save, and a 5-up invuln, and toughness 14?
It's actually a real tabletop unit.
It's Titanic enough? How about a strength 26 AP 5 damage 12 shot?
Holy shit.
What about 32 strength 6 AP 1 shots for chaff? Or the Seeker missile, which you can only get 1 attack with, but you got 10 of them per game, so it can do some good stuff. Or what about its very goofy melee attack? Just ramming
armored hull.
It ain't great, but hey, it's an option and a funny mental image. This thing has been all over the place in lore when it comes to what it's been used for.
What the fuck?
At one point, it was a dedicated Titan hunter, but it was eventually partially phased out as mantas aren't really something the Tau can afford to go 1-to-1 with on the kill-death ratio.
Like,
Still, though, it can absolutely be used as such, or at least as a great way to hamper one while other options of that sort take to the field as well. Despite being primarily used as this and as a dropship, it's also deployed in space battles to defend capital ships, because it's so absurdly powerful it can hold its own in either battlefield. But
that's kind of crazy. It's like a multi-use
or its profile. No,
like
no, not even
role
close.
kind of sense in the ground and in space battles. That's interesting.
Games. But let me ask you, have you ever wanted to drop an entire 40k army onto someone's backline? Because here's the exact line for you. This model has a transport capacity
Holy
of all of the
shit.
So let's go list building really quick.
200 Tau Empire infantry or tactical drone models, 4 Devilfish Sky Rain gunships or Hammerhead models, 8 battlesuit models with a wounds characteristic of 9. Bro, you can literally, that is a whole fucking army. Not even just like a starter army. That's a fucking, that's giant. Holy shit. And I'm assuming like, that's not even counting like your apocalypse units at the front line. This is just inside the fucking transport. So holy shit, man.
For the sake of simplicity, we'll keep each unit type identical. You can shove in 200 fire warriors, which for the sake of the argument will be breacher teams, 4 hammerhead gunships on top of that, and to round us off, 9 broadside battlesuits. For all of that, we have a grand total of 3,480 points you can shove inside of this thing, which means I misspoke. You aren't dropping an entire 40k army onto someone with this thing. You're dropping a full 2k point army and then another 3/4 of one on top of that. All
just
for the
kind of for free
cost of 5,580 points and probably an equivalent amount of dollars.
So you're saving. So you're definitely like on the grand scale of things saving points doing it that way, because that's not like factored in. Is that correct? Fuck. Wow.
180 points.
Maybe it is, but still, again, I don't know exactly how the tabletop works, but that's insane.
20 inches of movement, so rest easy knowing that there's nowhere on the battlefield you can't deploy an entire sep's worth of armed forces onto. But I'm not done, because the kit, in addition to the Manta, comes with 4 Devilfish, 2 of which can be a Hammerhead instead, 8 Crisis battlesuits, 6 gun drones, a sitting Ethereal, and 48 sitting Fire Warriors. So aside from this thing being 2,100 points on its own, it actually comes with an army. The Fire Warriors will probably have to be used as part of the model since they're all sitting, but give the Ethereal a floating Prophet hover chair and he's good to go. And to top it off, one of its weapons can't even fire across the entire length of the model. The thing is so wide and long that if you placed it at the very rear and had it fire forward, it couldn't reach the front. By God,
Jesus.
Manta, you were the dumbest, best thing GW has ever released, and I salute you for
Doesn't really make any sense,
special
but
fun bits, pick one unit this thing is shot at. Assuming you had some troops disembark in the same phase, if they shoot at that unit, they can re-roll their wound roll. Because no, being able to just hurt Titans on its own wasn't enough.
Oh my
the
god.
hammerheads you just vomited out of it need to get in on the fun too. Using a stratagem on the Manta also costs triple the amount of command points, so even more
Holy
so
shit.
than Imperium's Titans, you need to really be sure you want to use them on a Manta. For our last faction, we'll be looking at the Eldar now, because of course I saved them for last. Now, the most important thing to know about Eldar Titans is that they have the same philosophy as the rest of the Eldar. Move fast and hit hard. And while it would be quite difficult to do this with a tabletop model, in the lore these things are dancing about doing all sorts of acrobatic BS a primitive human Titan could never hope to do.
Yeah,
the pilots
true.
of these things, known as steersmen, are similar to a Wraith Knight in that they're often twins or triplets. On the bright side, however, these fellows don't need to be crewed by one living and one dead one. They can be, because this is an Eldar vehicle, so of course you can jam a ghost into it, but they don't have to be. The craft world where Titans are most common is Yime Lok. On paper, having an excess of Titans would make you think this is Bael'Tan 2.0, because having an excess of Titans should in theory mean you can kick a lot of ass. In practice, no, because only Bael'Tan is allowed to win, and only Saimhan when GW is feeling generous. Yime Lok, meanwhile, had a bunch of AdMech tech rats invade their craft world and pillage it until they were satisfied with what they stole, because we will never get a win, Eldar fans. The first option is the Revenant Scout Titan, and yes, the next Titan is also keeping up with the Ghost theme when it comes to Eldar mechs. Much like a Warhound, this is the Eldar version of heavy reconnaissance, as well as to provide heavy fire support to normal Eldar armies. When they need to see what's going on and make absolutely sure the info gets back home safe, the Eldar send the Revenants. Rather than heavy armor or void shields, they have holofields, but saying that might make you think the wrong thing because these monsters have fantastic saves. The pilots for these things actually meld with the Wraithbone core of the Titan, similar to how Principes become one with theirs over time, but without the whole overwhelming the soul of the pilot business. Revenants only have one pilot, so the whole twins or triplets thing comes into play with the other siblings piloting another Revenant, acting as a duo or trio of Titans running around the battlefield like an Adderall-addicted Call of Duty player mashing every input on his controller at once.
Jesus.
Only in the Revenant's case, it doesn't end like the COD asshole, who complains his expert movement tech of spamming reload, changing weapons, and crouch sliding all at the same time lost to someone who heard him and saw him coming from across the map and waited in a stairwell to shoot him. I wish Call of Duty players would stop trying to turn it into Titanfall. For some stats, they have the standard 2-up armor save, but are also flopping their elven cocks onto the table while rocking up with an almighty 4-up invuln. Sure, they only have 30 wounds, but that 4-up is huge. And at 13 toughness, they aren't actually any easier to wound than a Warhound if you do manage to break the save. The weapons of a Revenant are somewhat weak by Titan standards.
Anti-monster 4+, anti-vehicle 4+, assault turret. So those sonic lances really just are a jack of all trade, like attack in a sense. Man, so, and I must ask, right, because I know some of the weapons on these Titans are obviously interchangeable and whatnot. You can customize them. Does this Titan specifically get all those? Because if so, goddamn, it's only a few. It's not as many options as the Imperium ones, obviously, but damn, you know.
You can see them
Titanic Advance also is kind of nuts.
Use them as a supporting
I guess that's pretty similar to some of the other ones that the other races have. Revenant Jetpack.
The Revenant Pulsar is the hardest hitting weapon at strength 14. They've got
it's kind of the same as well, I guess.
And they can step on things. Using them against other Titans isn't necessarily a bad idea, but they're best used to rain down fire on standard troops, while your regular Eldar control the battlefield itself. This is helped further by not only having a movement of 16 inches, but also by them being able to advance to flat 8 inches rather than rolling for it. You do gotta spend double the command points per stratagem on them, but overall, not a bad Titan. Now the Phantom Titan, and this is one mean mech.
Jesus.
The same as a Revenant, the Phantom can do backflips across the battlefield and pose on the enemy, all the while blowing them to smithereens. Unlike the Revenant, the Phantom Titan can have up to 3 steersmen in it. Same as before, where they're twins or triplets, but now they meld into one single consciousness inside the machine, which itself is powered by the souls of dead Eldar. This gives them a level of reactiveness that makes Principes pale in comparison, because elf magic. Phantoms are only really deployed when it's time for the Eldar to go to war, not just the usual skirmishes that change fate 500 years down the line, but real and proper war, where the might of the craft world is brought to bear against an enemy. With the level of power they bring to bear, the only thing that can stop the Eldar once they break these out are the Titans of other enemies. I'll rip the band-aid off right away, Eldar fans. There's no strength 32 weapon for us. But you know, 8 attacks at strength 18, dealing 6 damage each. or D6 attacks and strength 20 doing 2d6 damage, and AP4 for all of those, and always hitting on 3s alongside their chaff killing options.
That's not bad.
I'm pretty content with that, man. It still wounds a warlord on 3s and plenty else on a 2. And of course we now get a melee weapon at strength 18, so the phantoms can swoop in and swing their swords about like no one's business too. It's got the same 2-up, 4-up invuln save profile as a Revenant, as well as the added bonus of having 55 wounds, so these things are going to be sticking around. As an added bonus, it's got 14 inches of movement and can shoot and charge in the same turn it fell back. As you can see from the datasheet in front of you, and hear from the words pouring out of my mouth like an unstoppable landfill of diarrhea, Phantom Titans are much better at fighting other Titanic scale enemies than the Revenant is. At 2100 points, you aren't seeing these bad boys often, but if an Eldar player busts one out, you best respect it. There's also the Warlock Titan, which unfortunately no longer exists, but once did during the days of Epic. It will never be remade because its sole purpose would be to make anyone who bought a Warlord Titan cry. This thing could see into the flow of time and take whatever actions necessary to avert or achieve the outcome it wants.
What the fuck?
Mid-battle foresight is coming out for something the size of a building. It
Holy
can also
shit.
twist time to its liking, so if a shot would miss, it now just wouldn't. Sure, in one timeline you dodged.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty insane.
Where you didn't dodge or it didn't miss. Bullets and beams will curve mid-battle just so you get hit.
What the fuck?
The entire thing is powered by dead warlocks and farseers.
That's insane.
Properly magic, unlike the...
So, like, yeah, I could totally see why they got rid of that. Like, because holy fuck, man. In the middle of a tabletop, and it's like, actually, reroll. Yes, my bullet has curved 60 degrees and hit you head on. Yes. Like, what the fuck? Obviously not a bullet. A fucking Titan being able to do that is insane. Like, what the fuck? I can see where that'd be a little bit overpowered for sure.
The entire thing is powered by dead warlocks and farseers. It's properly magic, unlike the Psi Titan, which is just powered by magic. This thing waves its hands, and everything nearby explodes. And while this is conjecture on my part, I'm assuming that if you did manage to kill one of these things, the psychic backlash is creating a miniature Eye of Terror on whatever planet it was on.
Holy
you don't
shit.
cram that many psychers into one object and not expect something to go wrong if it breaks. And
That's
even
fair.
more so than the Orc Trouser Cannon, this weapon is an actual dildo.
It looks
Just
pretty
look at
suspicious,
it. Now,
yeah.
there will be no do or don't
I was gonna say
because
something
is
about
like
that,
6
but I didn't
different
have to.
factions, and I am lazy. But I do have just one piece of advice. Not necessarily a warning, more so just a recommendation. Be aware of what you're throwing a Titan into. Out of every single kind of model in 40k, Titans are the ones you can safely throw into whatever without fear of it immediately melting. Toughness 13 is the low bar for them on that front, and 30 wounds is considered to be weak by their standards as well. They're not exactly easy to kill, but consider that Wraithguard have an option for a strength 14 weapon on them, which can wound most Titans on 4s and Warhounds on 3s. Or a Fire Prism, which for 180 points has a weapon that's strength 18, does d6 damage, and has 2 shots a pop. A Titan can absolutely take on either of those things and any other faction's equivalents. And if you're using a Titan, chances are you're playing Apocalypse, which is as much for the spectacle as it is for actually winning the game. But even though between wounds, saves, and toughness, a Titan can probably eat whatever's thrown at it, make sure you're ready to commit before it has to do so. No one wants to be the guy whose Titan got cored turn 2 because you zoned out and forgot that Baneblade over there is actually a Shadow Sword and just ate 4 volcano shots to the face. And
That's
those
fair.
are the Titans of Warhammer 40k. Like I said, not quite all of them, but all the ones that actually matter, in my humble opinion. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. You are the Titan to my Games Workshop. A glorious thing to behold, even if the value of that dollar is rather debatable. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thank you for watching, and take care out there.
Wow, guys. Lot of supporters. That's awesome to see. What a great video.
At the end of the video, it's me
watch
again.
the end.
Just here to remind you that Titanfall 3 is never happening, and any lore we will ever get in the future is going to be from an Apex character.
Oh no.
You will not get Titanfall 3. You will not get more weapons and mechs. You will buy Apex Funbucks for overpriced skins.
Wow, what a statement there at the end. Wow, guys, that was Titans Pacific Rim 40k by Pancreas No Works. Big shout out to Ratarat over on our Discord for that recommendation. That was a fantastic video. You know me, I love Titans. I love learning a little bit more about each Titan in depth, especially on the tabletop. It was cool to see that, like, that in-depth kind of like comparison between them in a sense, you know what I'm saying? Obviously in animations and stuff they can take each other on, but obviously they have to be balanced on the tabletop as well. I totally understand that. So it was very, very interesting to see those Xenos Titans, and obviously, again, some are less Titans than other. Obviously the Necrons, I feel like they get a little bit shafted. The Tau get a little shafted, but the Mantra is obviously fucking sick, is what I will say. And obviously Orc Titans, you know, who doesn't love a good just rolling scrap pile? But the Imperium Titans, I think, obviously are my favorite Titans, just in design alone. The most imposing, lumbering, you know, slow, not slow per se, but they're a traditional fucking mech, you know what I'm saying? When you think of a mech, you know, unless you're thinking of like a Gundam style mech, kinda like a mobile mech, you think of a fucking Imperium Titan, you know what I'm saying? So I vibe with them very, very hard. They're sick. I love the fucking style of them so much. But yeah, guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe for more content from me, and leave your recommendations down in the comments below. Come join our Discord, be a part of the discussions, and yeah, I love talking to you guys there, so come click on my channel, and then there should be a link to my Discord there. Clickable link, clickable join link. So come join that Discord for sure, for sure. But yeah, guys, big shout out to our members, our Hastati, and our Triarii out there. Paralyzed Tortoise, big shout out to you, sir. I appreciate you as always. And yeah, guys, without any further delay, this has been Centurion, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace, guys.